Also, in related news, Japan is piling on punitive measures against Russia amid the latter's violent campaign in Ukraine. For more, I have Walter Sim live on the line. Walter, it's good to have you on.
Nice to see you again, Sunny.
Right now, Walter, earlier this week, Japan's cabinet agreed to freeze the assets of almost 400 Russian individuals, including President Vladimir Putin's two daughters. Let's start with details about these additional sanctions.
Yes, indeed. And these sanctions really come as, Japan has been appalled by the atrocities of the war in Russia. We see Prime Minister Fumio Kishida having gone as far as to explicitly describe Russian actions in Ukraine as intolerable war crimes. And so the decision earlier this week follows a news conference where Mr. Kishida accused Russia of indiscriminately killing civilians and attacking nuclear facilities. So, well, on the sanctions front, Japan has really been acting in line with other G7 countries, and it hopes to use such asset freezes to increase the economic pressure on Russia, such that Russia will feel the strain and back down on its atrocities in Ukraine. So with this latest round of sanctions, the total number of individuals now being sanctioned has come to nearly 500 people, and they include lawmakers, military personnel, as well as other people in President Vladimir Putin's inner circle, such as oligarchs, as well as his family members as well. On top of that, another 40 banks and military-related companies are also under sanctions, whilst Japan is banning the import of things like Russian vodka, as well as some wooden products and machinery. It has also expelled 8 Russian diplomats based here.
Right. Walter, staying with sanctions, last Friday, I believe, in a rather surprising shift from an earlier cautious stance over sanctions aimed at Russia's energy, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that Japan will phase out Russian coal imports. What appears to have prompted this particular decision, and what alternatives are being explored by Japan with regard to its energy needs?
Right. Well, to be honest, I think the key trigger behind this decision was the fact that other G7 countries have also said that they would phase out coal. As you pointed out, this is a huge decision, and but on the other hand, I think Japan, given how major phases in Japan, Japan would be reluctant to be seen as the sole holdout in terms of not banning coal import. So because of that, I think Japan has made the announcement, but what is especially telling is that Japan has not committed to any particular timeline or deadline by which it will stop importing Russian coal. When asked about this earlier this week, Japanese Economy Minister Koichi Hagiuda would only say that Japan will carefully assess electricity demand as well as the influence on industries. And I think, the announcement really is to, whilst the announcement has made headlines around the world, what the economy minister's comments really suggests is that Japan is trying to buy time as it figures out how to, manage the shortage of coal, as it tries to, diversify its sources of coal as well as other energy sources before the stoppage actually takes effect. It's also quite telling, I think, that Japan has not put the plug on its stakes in Russia's Sakhalin-1 offshore oil joint venture, as well as the Sakhalin-2 LNG project. And this could also be because no similar decision has been made by other G7 countries, even though Japan has also said that it will try to diversify these energy sources, being a resource-poor country. On top of that, Prime Minister Kishida has also said that Japan will move more strongly towards renewable energy, and the crisis will also have given momentum to restart nuclear plants more widely as well. And Kishida has said that nuclear should be seen as a stable form of energy, and so I think we could see more movement on this front going forward.
Right, I see. And regarding the plight of ordinary Ukrainians, Walter, amid Russia's aggression, I hear Japan's warm welcome to Ukrainian refugees has ignited an unlikely debate over its refugee policy. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Right. I think the main point of this debate is because, Japan has thus far historically not been the most welcoming country to refugees or asylum seekers. Japan has bore the brunt of plenty of bad press of immigrants being ill-treated or even dying whilst in detention. And before the Ukraine crisis, Japan's refugee acceptance rate has been historically very low. In 2020, only 47 applications were granted out of nearly 4,000 people wanting to seek asylum in Japan, whilst those allowed to stay are left to really fend for themselves or rely on NGOs for support. But this time, in contrast, Japan is really throwing open its doors to Ukrainian refugees. Already more than 400 Ukrainians have sought refuge in Japan, and Japan, in doing so, has waived the usual stringent requirements of visas, of guarantors, and on top of that, is even offering a daily stipend of about $20 to Ukrainians who seek refuge here. Of course, any conflict like the Ukraine war would warrant empathy and compassion, and it is good to see Japan, changing its policies towards refugees and taking in Ukrainians who have had to flee their homes due to war. But I think this is raising some uncomfortable questions as well over the apparent difference in how Japan is treating the Ukrainians as opposed to other refugees and asylum seekers from other conflict zones around the world.
Right, I see. Walter, some pundits claim the war in Ukraine is spurring a pacifist Japan to consider a stronger defense strategy. What more can you tell us?
Yes, indeed. And well, the crisis is somewhat timely because Japan is in the midst of reviewing its national security strategy with a decision to come later this year. We see hawkish politicians within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, such as former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, arguing that Ukraine would not have been attacked had it not given up its nuclear weapons when it became a sovereign state. So they are using this argument to really push for Japan to be part of a nuclear sharing arrangement with the United States, its security ally, such that US nuclear weapons can be hosted on Japanese soil. Japan is also, in the meanwhile, considering the adoption of the preemptive strike capability. So what this would do is to allow Japan to strike enemy bases based on intelligence that Japan is about to be attacked. So the argument being made here is that this is necessary as a defensive tool and does not at all shift Japan away from its pacifist war-renouncing stance. And I think all this comes as Japan really is feeling the heat. Japan is really on tenterhooks over regional movements by China, by North Korea, and especially Russia. Especially Russia of late, where Russia has been ramping up military drills around Japan's waters. It has been hosting live firing drills on the 4 disputed islands it has with Japan. And yesterday, Russia also conducted tests of submarine-launched missiles off the coast of Japan, with the target being a Japanese Navy ship. And so I think all this is really giving Japan a lot of uneasiness about regional security and is pushing Japan towards taking a stronger security posture.
Right. And on the economic front, Walter, I believe Japan is enduring its fair share of hardships amid soaring prices for gas and groceries, given the crisis in Eastern Europe, of course, and the prolonged pandemic. How are authorities there in Japan responding to these challenges, which, of course, are universal at the moment, Walter?
Yes, indeed. These challenges are universal, but I think it's acutely being felt in Japan, where companies have traditionally been very reluctant to pass on increase in costs to consumers. I think one telling example that recently made the news was this Umaibo, a corn snack puff stick that had stayed at 10 yen a stick since its launch in 1979, and the fact that a company, the manufacturer, was moving ahead with a price increase of 2 yen to 12 yen really made headlines and went viral on social media. So I think this anecdote really shows how sensitive the Japanese are to price increases, and so because of this, these increases, Prime Minister Kishida has said that his government is going to compile an economic support package this month so as to soften the blow on households as well as companies that are facing due to the soaring prices. So this upcoming package is set to focus on four areas, though the details are not yet known. And the four areas are really the higher crude oil prices, ensuring a stable and steady food supply, providing funding support for SMEs, as well as providing stronger assistance to those in need. But yet at the same time, I think Japan is also very concerned about volatile currency movements. We see the Japanese yen now having plunged to a 20-year low against the US dollar. And this week, yen is set to take a bite out of company profits as well. So Japan has not yet intervened on currency markets as yet, but all eyes on a monetary policy meeting that the Bank of Japan is set to convene in 2 weeks to see if the BOJ will make any policy measures to stem this currency movement.
I see. And Walter, before you go, one final very short question. On the pandemic front, I understand that the XE variant has been detected there in Japan amid a slight rebound in COVID-19 infections. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's right. The XE variant was actually detected in a traveler who came in from the United States, and this traveler was duly quarantined. And because of that, there has not been any reports of community transmission of the XE variant as yet. But still, the authorities have said that people should not be letting their guard down, as Japan might be on the verge of a seventh wave of cases. I think they are particularly concerned over the sluggish booster vaccination rate amongst youth. Just 46.8% of the Japanese population has had their third shot, which I think is quite low as compared to many other countries around the world. But that said, I think Japan is really reluctant to go back to the days of quasi-emergency or emergency restrictions amid this recognition that whilst COVID-19 is still a threat, the Omicron variant is milder, and also with the recognition that much of the world is opening up. This slight uptick in cases comes as Japan lifted its quasi-emergency in late March, and now Japan as a whole is recording about 50,000 cases a day, with fewer than 10,000 in Tokyo. So I think the sense is that unless COVID-19 evolves into a much more serious variant, Japan is coming to terms with the virus and learning how to live with it.
Right, which is also the case here in South Korea. All right, Walter, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.